Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and in this video we're going to be doing something that has been asked for a long time, and that is we're going to be comparing a Matten filter versus a sponge filter, so stay tuned. So if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. We've done a lot on filtration in the past. We've looked at sponge filters, hang on the back filters, under gravel filters, canister filters, just about every type of filtration you could possibly imagine. We also do species spotlights. We talk a lot about water chemistry. With 60 fish tanks in our fish room, we've always got something going on. We would also like to say thank you to Flip Aquatics for sponsoring this video. If you need anything related to shrimp, nano fish, filtration, definitely check out flipaquatics.com. He was the one that supplied us with these Matten filters that we will be looking at today. They are so far pretty awesome. We'll take a closer look at them. So I figured the first thing, let's talk about cost. The Matten filter that we're going to be looking at today, this goes on a 10-gallon tank. The filter plus the PVC necessary to run the filter was about $13 or $14. Now we're going to be comparing these to sponge filters. And in this video we're going to be using, it's an older filter, sorry it's a little bit dirty, but this is a Hydro 4 sponge filter, and you can generally find these things on the internet somewhere between $8, $9 a piece. Now do you need a sponge filter this large for a 10-gallon? No, you could probably go down to a Hydro 1 or 2 and maybe find them for around $6 or $7 a piece. But I mention the cost only because I want to look at how much it costs compared to the surface area that you're getting for each type of filter. So let's take a look at the Matten filter first. Again, this thing, and I'm going to show you how this all fits together and how it's installed in a moment, but this filter, as we can see here, based on its size, it gives us about 226 cubic inches of filtration. So that is area where beneficial bacteria can grow to help us with our water parameters. So again, this is the Hydro 4 when it comes to surface area. Once we take away the part here in the middle, we're getting around 60 cubic inches of filtration. So what does that mean? It means the Matten filter is giving us a lot more surface area for beneficial bacteria to grow. And in fact, if we wanted to match the surface area, considering the pore sizes are the same, we would need almost 4 of these in a 10-gallon tank to equal the Matten filter surface area. So both of them are easy to set up. So with the Matten filter, we get this PVC that's supplied, and it's actually supplied with a hole drilled in the back. And all you have to do is take air line, put it in the hole, and shove that all the way down. Now if at this point you want to use an air stone, you can do that. You just attach the air stone to the bottom here, hook up the other side to an air pump, and you are ready to go. It is that simple. To install this takes probably less than 3 minutes. Of course, the same could be said for a sponge filter. These are also extremely easy to install. All you would have to do is pull off this lift tube here, run the air line through the lift tube, hook it into here, put the lift tube back on, put this back together. You've installed this, put it in your fish tank. It also takes less than 3 minutes. So I would say when it comes to installation, they're both super simple. Now, could you use a power head to filter either one of these things? Absolutely. But generally speaking, for people who use sponge filters or Matten filters, often they have a number of tanks in their fish room and they're trying to filter their tanks efficiently. And so usually you have an air pump that's running air through either the Matten filter or the sponge filter to make things more economical. So now let's take a look at what they look like when they're inside of a tank. This is a Matten filter in a 10-gallon tank, and our 10-gallon tanks for the most part are set up lengthwise, so we're looking at them from the side. And with this view, the Matten filter looks really good. It just kind of blends in with the background. You really don't even know that the filter is there. When we look at a tank from the traditional front view, however, the Matten filter does stand out a little bit more. It's extended a little bit out from the side. You can see the PVC in the back. Now, one of the things that some people have done to kind of cut down on that viewing from the front panel to make it not so obvious is you can actually paint that part of the front of the fish tank. If you paint that black, you would never know that that is there, and then you'd have the rest of the viewing panel to view the fish. Now, when we look at the sponge filter, one of the comments that is consistently brought up when we've done other types of comparisons is the fact that sponge filters, they really stand out. And again, the purpose of sponge filters and Matten filters are usually when you have a lot of tanks and you cannot realistically run either hang on the backs or canister filters on all the tanks that you have. So here we're looking at a 10-gallon tank. This is a Hydro 2 sponge filter, so it's not quite as big and bulky as the one we just showed you, but again, you're getting far less surface area for beneficial bacterial growth using a filter this size. It stands out a little bit more, but again, it's taking up a little bit less space in the tank. Now, sponge filters don't have to stand out. We look here at this 33-gallon long, and we've got plants, we've got rockwork. Sometimes you can do a pretty good job of hiding sponge filters so they're not quite so obvious, as you can see here. So let's talk about the use of these filters from a practical perspective. Again, a lot of times when you're using sponge filters or Matten filters especially, you've got some type of breeding tank, whether that's shrimp or small fish fry. And in this case, the Matten filter might be a little bit easier to deal with. And one of the things that we have found is with the Matten filters, it's a whole lot easier to catch fish out of tanks when they need to be moved to larger tanks or we're selling them, where they often will hide behind sponge filters and you either have to remove the sponge filter or kind of try to catch the fish around it. With the Matten filter, it just forms a wall and the fish generally don't go behind that when we're trying to catch them, so it makes that a little bit easier. Either way, these are great filters for breeding fish because we don't have to worry about them getting sucked up into intake tubes or excessive flow. And if you're breeding shrimp especially, you have a lot of surface area. In fact, far more surface area on the Matten filter compared to a sponge filter. Now, in either case, you do have an uplift tube, and often people will comment on our videos, hey, there's a fish stuck in one of your uplift tubes, and usually that's a bristlenose pleco. They're not stuck, they just like to kind of burrow their way in there and hang out there, and they come out when they're ready. That same thing could happen with a Matten filter as you've got that uplift tube, and in this case, the fish could actually go behind the Matten filter, which might be a slightly bigger problem, although certainly not a major one. Either way, if you wanted to, you could silicone a small plastic or mesh screen to these uplift tubes to deal with that issue. Okay, let's talk a little bit about maintenance. Now, we have done videos on how we maintain our sponge filters in the past. I will put that in the upper right-hand corner, as well as in the description below. It's a little different, so if you watch that, you'll probably get a different perspective, but we clean the Matten filters the same way we clean sponge filters. Both of them are relatively easy to clean. Some water, rinse them out, wait till all the brown stuff stops coming out, and you're ready to roll. Now, of course, it's going to be a little bit more convenient to clean a sponge filter just because they're going to be easier to remove from a tank and easier to put back in the tank. The other thing that you have to consider is whether or not the tank has substrate. If there is substrate in the tank and you're using a Matten filter, you're probably going to have to do something to keep the substrate from going into the area where the Matten filter normally sits. Now, that's easy enough to do. For us, we just have a Tupperware top and we just kind of slide the substrate, whether that's sand or gravel, move that over when we first establish the tank, put the Matten filter in, and we're ready to go. And every time we change it, it's not really a big deal to keep the substrate where it belongs. The other thing that you're going to want to consider is the versatility aspect. Now, when it comes to sponge filters, it's really easy to move a sponge filter from one tank to another, regardless of the size. Of course, with a Matten filter, these are usually cut out to the size of the tank that they're going in. And so let's say moving one from a 10-gallon to another size tank that doesn't have those exact dimensions, that's probably not going to work out very well. Now, because the Matten filter has a much larger surface area, you're not going to necessarily need to clean that as often as a sponge filter. So you can let those go a little bit longer, but in either case, proper maintenance is going to ensure that you're getting flow through the filter for your beneficial bacteria and to maximize their mechanical filtration, where both of them are probably going to do not quite as well as a hang on the back or a canister. They're not going to suck as many particles out of the water column, but we've found when you properly maintain them, they do a pretty good job. One last thing you're going to want to consider when it comes to sponge filters is they have these internal plastic pieces and the sponge filter kind of rests in the middle and then these things clip together. When these get really old, sometimes they start to crack. They can be replaced relatively cheaply and it would take a long time for this to happen, but these plastic pieces can and do crack sometimes, in which case the pieces no longer fit together and you'll find your sponge filter kind of floating around. But again, this takes a long time to happen and they are cheap to replace. Another thing to keep in mind is they do have corner Matten filters, which kind of blends both of them. And now you're not going to get the surface area of a Matten filter like we have here with a corner unit, but you can buy a corner unit where it's got plastic pieces that silicone into the tank and keep that on the corner as opposed to taking up an entire wall. In fact, we did a fish room tour, Rick Borstein's fish room, where he uses a lot of them. If you want to see them, I will put that fish room tour in the upper right hand corner as well as in the description below so you can check that out. So if we were to summarize, the Matten filter is giving you a whole lot more surface area. And when it comes to surface area per dollars, it's going to be far more efficient. If you're looking at a tank from the side, it will look pretty darn good. If you're looking at it from the front, you might have to paint that little section of the front just so it kind of hides it a little bit more. You're getting a little bit more versatility when it comes to the sponge filter, being able to move it around, a little bit easier to clean. All right, everyone, I hope you found that useful. If you did, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.